Hello everybody, welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. So today we are talking about another story out of Ray Bradbury's Dark Carnival. This obviously has been a blast to read. I highly recommend that you grab it. I'm almost halfway through now, and we've had some great stories, so I would definitely pick this up if you haven't. The story is The Crowd. It was first published back in 1943 in Weird Tales in the May issue, and I really enjoyed this story. It's pretty dark. It deals with a certain amount of reality that can be sort of hard to look at. It deals with the idea that when there's an accident, a crowd of people always form. And this story comes from the perspective of the person who's been in the accident, who's hurt and lying on the ground, and watching the shifting faces that are above them. And of course, the prose are incredible. It is 43, so it's a little bit earlier, but really, really well written. The comparison of the spinning wheels of the vehicle that they were in to the comparison of the people kind of rotating around them and looking down, and how it's hard to breathe because all the people are breathing on them. And it's a very interesting, kind of sick, twisted story. I'm going to go into some spoilers about it, so if you don't want the story to get spoiled at all, you can stop watching there. Just make sure you read The Crowd and then come on back and watch, because I've got some interesting information about it. So this is the story of a person who was in a car accident, and their car is flipped over, and they're out on the road. They can see their wheels spinning. Of course, this is before seatbelts, right? I mean, seatbelts existed, I assume, of course, but it wasn't law that you wear a seatbelt. It wasn't common that people would wear seatbelts. So each one of the accidents in this story, the person is thrown clear of the car, of course, because they're not strapped in any way. They're just whipped around inside the vehicle and then thrown out of the vehicle. So right after this accident occurs, a crowd forms around the person that was in the accident. And the person laying on the ground feels very weird about this crowd. The crowd knows that the person's going to live. He can hear them saying, they're going to be fine, they're going to be fine. And they form so quickly that it seems very strange to them. They talk about how the wheels of their car are still spinning and the crowd has already gathered, even though those wheels would slow down very quickly and stop. There's already a big crowd there. So, of course, the ambulance shows up, they go to the hospital, they get better. But they're really obsessed about the idea of this crowd. And they're talking to their friend Morgan. And Morgan really stuck out to me in this story as a very cool character. At first, I thought Morgan was a female, which I think would have been awesome. But a little bit later, when they're talking, you realize it's a guy that he's talking to, which I was slightly disappointed by, to be perfectly honest with you. I thought we had this really tough kind of New Yorker female character in this story, but it's just his buddy Morgan. Our main character becomes obsessed with crowds that gather around accidents, and they look up all these old photographs and things, and they literally start finding the same people at these accidents, like from 1937 wearing the exact same clothes, 1940 wearing the exact same clothes, 1943 wearing the exact same clothes. And he's got all these pictures and all this evidence of these reoccurring people that crowd an accident the minute that it happens. And he feels like this crowd actually determines whether the person lives or dies. And if they decide that the person needs to die, they move them from the accident. Because, of course, you should never move a person from an accident, because moving them could hurt them worse. First responders understand how to move a person. Normal people do not understand that. But this crowd will move a person to try to make them more comfortable or get them out of the car in order to kill them. So he decides he's going to go to the police with all this evidence that he's collected. His buddy Morgan lends him his car, because his car's totaled, of course. And on the way to the police station, he, of course, is in a terrible accident. This truck comes out of nowhere and just destroys the car he's in. And Ray Bradbury does a neat job of describing the fact that as the accident's happening, our lead character is actually not even surprised that it's happening, because he's going to report this crowd to the police. He understands that they probably have enough control over life, I guess, that he can't just go report this to the police. So he's in a terrible accident. Of course, the crowd shows up immediately, and this time they actually move him, and it kills him, of course. And the last line is like, he tries to speak, and he gets a little bit out, and he says something like, I guess I'm going to be joining you now. I'm going to be part of the crowd. And then he closes his eyes and waits for the coroner, which is pretty dark and pretty disturbing. And overall, it's a pretty good story. I enjoyed it. It leaves a lot to the imagination. Like, who are these people and why do they do this? And I guess if he joins the crowd, maybe they were accident victims in the past. Maybe, but how did he know he was going to join the crowd? Like, there's weird questions that are kind of unanswered in this. But overall, it's a pretty good story. Now, it is in the October country, and the October country, of course, is 99.999% exactly the same. I wasn't able to find any tiny changes. A lot of the stories that he brought over, he just did little subtle changes to that we've talked about in the past. This one I couldn't really find anything. But the Ray Bradbury Theater is different. And this is probably the first time I'm going to say I think the Ray Bradbury Theater might have been a tiny bit better than the actual story, which is cool. Of course, Ray Bradbury is totally involved with that. You know, he introduces every episode and all that kind of stuff. But I think over time he must have thought about this story quite a bit and figured out a way to actually make it more interesting and more clear. And I really appreciated that. So I do recommend that you see that. I'm going to talk about the Ray Bradbury Theater version right now with some spoilers. So if you want to watch that without spoilers, go and do that. It's on YouTube. You can find it there easily. Or, of course, you can buy a DVD box set of Ray Bradbury Theater. It's a cool little artifact. It's an interesting thing to have. But this Ray Bradbury Theater specifically, it's all the same. He's with Morgan and he's talking about the crowd and he shows him the pictures. But now Morgan decides to drive him to the police station. And as they're heading to the police station, he sees one of the crowd people just walking down the street. And he says, wait, stop the car. And he jumps out and he chases this crowd person. And then he sees another crowd person. And then that other crowd person starts chasing him. And he jumps in Morgan's car. Morgan's gotten out of the car to help him chase. He jumps in Morgan's car and takes off. And these crowd people are like running out into the street and he's avoiding them, and then he hits somebody and he freaks out and he flips the car and he's in an accident, of course. But he's okay. He climbs out of the car and he goes running, and a crowd is already formed around the person that he hit. And when he gets to the crowd, he realizes that he hit his friend Morgan, and Morgan is lying dead on the pavement. And he looks around the crowd and he sees that Morgan is one of the people in the crowd staring down at the victim and then just moving away. So in this story, we realize that's how it ends right there. In this story, we realize that anyone who dies in an accident that the crowd gathers around becomes part of the crowd, because we literally see Morgan in the crowd. And from now on, of course, Morgan will be one of the people that show up at accidents in this area in the future. And I found that very kind of fascinating and cool. A very unique way to tell the exact same story, but this little subtle twist just made everything settle in so much better. It gives Morgan a place in the story, for starters, and it clarifies some of the questions that the story might have raised the first time around. So I really liked that version of the story. I can't say that it's better than the book. Straight up, I cannot say that. I feel like the core story is better than the core story in the book, but of course Ray Bradbury's prose just knock it out of the park. Like nothing, you can never capture Ray Bradbury's prose on screen. You just can't do it. They're too good. So the story is better in Dark Carnival, but the basic plot is better in Ray Bradbury Theater, which I never thought I'd say. So that's cool. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the like button. If you'd like to see more like this, make sure to subscribe, and have a great day.